Hello everybody, this is Kei from F5 Networks, and today we want to do Asia Pacific specific session for Bridge the Divide by F5 and NGINX. Today with me I have Mr. Alan Murphy from NGINX Business Unit of F5 Networks. Alan, you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Kay. I'm Alan Murphy with NGINX. I was Technical Director for APCJ, now part of the F5 family. Prior to NGINX, I was actually at F5 for about 10 years, so it feels good to be back.
Yeah, welcome back, Alan.
Thank you.
Thanks for the introduction. So today we want to start with some of the recap from our global webinar of F5 and NGINX, Bridging the Divide. And what actually that means, Alan, is that there's a bridge that we have to build to fill the divide between something. In this context, there's several divide there, but the most important notion there is all about the divide between infrastructure and the applications. I think we had a really deep dive discussion on this one in our global webinar, so I'm not going into the details here, but one thing that I wanted to highlight here is how do we have the similar situation here in Asia Pacific, right? Mm-hmm. And just to introduce some of the data points to prove this one here in Asia Pacific, I have brought up one page here to introduce the data points that shows how the enterprises in Asia Pacific are working on their effort around digital transformation. Mm-hmm. And they have to transform because of this divide, and the divide can be the challenge there. And what they are doing actually is to explore several things. And the benefit, one of the benefit they are working on is to create a competitive advantage, mm-hmm. and some of them can be exploring the new businesses. And in this chart, as you can see, most of the regions here in Asia Pacific are really aggressively marching toward creating a competitive advantage, while Japan and Korea are also working on the transformational effort with exploring the new businesses. Mm-hmm. So Alan, if you see these data points, based on your experience in NGINX during the last 2 years, mm-hmm. how do you see this situation? How do you see any different ideas or opinion here?
Yeah, it's a great chart. It's a great data point. I think when we talk digital transformation at an applied level, mm-hmm. we're typically talking about microservices, migration to the cloud, API first, API gateway. And generally speaking, I would agree with most of the data in this chart. One difference though is on the competitive advantage for Japan in particular. We've had a great opportunity to work with a few customers who are building microservices platforms in particular, specifically for competitive advantage. So I think that trend, based on the investment in Japan, the focus on building new architectures in Japan, is absolutely on the upswing.
Right, thanks for that. Yeah. So actually you brought up a really good point, because in this session, we really want to talk about the actual customer story here in Asia Pacific, what you have seen and how we can solve the problem for the customers. So Alan, in this page, we actually found one example here, which you might want to introduce with one of the customers in Asia Pacific which you have been interacting with, right? Yeah,
happy to. We have so many examples, right? So many customers we've worked with who are on that digital transformation journey. They're building new infrastructure, building new architectures. The two I mentioned in Japan on that previous chart, one is an automobile manufacturer who's building an IoT platform for cars that's all microservices based, very much a competitive advantage. Another is a media company in Japan who's building a microservices platform for real-time media. But I think one of my favorite use cases is a large enterprise out of Australia who's building a complete internal API platform for their developers. So they develop very large-scale software that they use internally and then in turn use for their customers. And the infrastructure that they build is all API driven. And one of the challenges that they had initially was how to differentiate between north-south traffic, which is typically ingress traffic, and east-west traffic, so service-to-service traffic. So over the past 9 months, we've been building architectures for them on segmenting out those two traffic types, creating things like secure service-to-service traffic for east-west, and then on the north-south side with F5 technology, how to bring in things like behavioral DDoS, advanced security for SSL management, all of that incoming traffic. But one of the really cool things with the digital transformation story is the ability to use technologies like open tracing, which identifies how the traffic is coming in and out throughout the infrastructure, traffic patterns. It gives them more intelligent insight as they're building that platform. And for me, that's such a great example of using modern tools to help enable that digital transformation, but then also deploying technologies from the NGINX suite as well as the F5 suite for a complete internal API traffic management solution. Yeah.
Right. So when you say those two different environments between East, West, and North, South, can you elaborate a little bit more how the pain point was different? And does that mean actually the traffic patterns and the actual pain point and the challenge they had in the North-South is so different from the beginning of the project, which they were focusing on East-West? Is that right?
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. The traffic patterns are different, the traffic types are different. When we're talking about North-South traffic, specifically in the API world, but also for any type of more modern microservices environment, you're typically talking about known traffic that has a policy to allow that traffic in.
Right.
And that policy can be very, very sophisticated with advanced DDoS, or it can be more of a simple API publishing front end, for example. But the traffic that comes in is generally known and it's structured, but you want to build guardrails around that traffic so that it's still secure, it's still always available, the endpoints are always available. With East-West traffic, we're talking about more service-to-service traffic. So volume is typically much greater. So one internal API call may generate 10, or coming internal may generate 10 service-to-service API calls. So you have to deal with much larger volume, higher traffic patterns, but you also have different security requirements. The traffic in that East-West environment is typically private, but you still want to do things like add SSL if you can. So building a system that supports highly performant SSL communication between services is really, really critical to make sure that that traffic is always secure.
Right.
But the application for things like MTLS between service and service is different than how you would apply things like SSL termination at the front. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So the project that you have found is really about understanding the difference of those two different environments, even though it's a single platform, because of the traffic patterns and application requirement, people are suffering, potentially suffering, and trying to explore the best solution for them. And I believe one of the beauty of the collaboration between F5 technology and NGINX technology here is to provide the consistent but broader option to deploy depending on what the exact expectation customer may have. Would you agree with this point?
Completely agree, yeah. So for us, working with F5 and now being part of this team, when we work with customers who are on that digital transformation journey, it's all about new tools, new tool sets, new traffic patterns, new ways to architect. And having F5 and NGINX together now provides solutions for them at any part of that stack or any part of that architecture or any part of that traffic flow. So better together, bridging that divide is absolutely something that we're very excited about, because now we can talk about anything to do with security in North-South, security East-West, high availability, service discovery, behavioral DDoS. There's just no limit to what a customer can do, and there are no restrictions with what a customer can choose, which I think is most important. Yeah.
Great to learn a lot of things from this single customer case study. Thanks for introducing Alan.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you.
Thank you.